Black consciousness, the guiding theory, can be trusted by all black people, including women. And women is written in capital letters. I'm sure those of you who follow us in the social media know that already there's been a big debate about that. To say, you see, the charge is that black consciousness excludes women. Already in the topic itself, you're excluding black women. Because when you say black people and then you then say women, you have defined them outside of the black. Now we said, yes, it is true, but let's look at the context. We try to explain. The context is that there are sisters in the radical black movement today who argue that black consciousness excludes women. So this topic is a response to a proposition which has been made that black consciousness excludes black women. And I'm going to try to make moves to deal with this proposition. Let me tell you a little story which is disturbing, but I think, let's say, because we're in the safe space. On Facebook, there was a conversation between some of us and our sister, Smamkele Dlakavu, that's her name. And she made the point that black consciousness excludes black women. And a robust engagement started. Luckily, in that conversation, some members of SASO, 1970s, those who were with Bigo, were able to participate in that conversation. And the conclusion of that conversation was that she was incorrect to argue that black consciousness excludes women. Now, what was good for me for that debate was that it clarified the methodological question. What it meant is that when we deal with this issue, there are two questions we are asking. First, the claim. Is black consciousness inherently anti-black women as a philosophy? That's the first claim. So you are dealing with the philosophy itself in its own terms, and you ask the question, does black consciousness exclude black women? For me, that debate led to this clarification of we need to ask that question. The second question was, are practices of some men of black consciousness anti-women? So, in other words, let us be clear. We talk about the philosophy and then we talk about practices. So now we must deal with this. But what happened after this clarification was that this sister went on Twitter and said that she has heard, or she was told, that I had threatened people with rape. I went to a bar and sisters were sitting and I had said, I'm going to rape you, something like this. And this claim was then taken ahead on Facebook by another sister from here, Cape Town, who said now 3 women has come up to say, indeed I've raped them, something like this. Of course, they don't say the names of these sisters or these people I don't speak for themselves. They remain anonymous, but the explanation is that they are terrified because if they were to say who they are, I will harm them. I will harm these sisters because I'm dangerous. And they're so terrified they will not even go to the police to open a case. Of course, from my point of view, I understood this accusation to start from, because I couldn't explain why. So I think these accusations come from the debate we had earlier on with the sister, and she was clarified, but she was not satisfied. Therefore, to make her point that black consciousness is anti-women, she had to find and create a rapist in me. Because as Pastor was introducing me, some people see me as Vice Biko. So if you say black consciousness is bad, find a person who is seen as a Bikoist, then see that, project that person as anti-women, and you resolve the debate. So the debate ends because we must now have our Vice Biko who is also a rapist. So There's no more discussion about whether black consciousness excludes women. That is my only explanation. Maybe there's other explanations. I'm saying these things here because it's a safe space. I've not said these things anywhere else. And I am, of course, as you can imagine, from my perspective, very agitated by this and hurt, of course. Because I know these sisters, right? And I am looking at still pursuing the possibility of getting some kind of justice. Now, I was thinking, let's say for argument's sake, even if these accusations were true, say I was in jail, I was arrested for rape and all that, it will not still address or would not prove the fact that black consciousness itself is anti-women. What it will do, it will simply say this particular individual is anti-women. I was thinking, and I will make an example here in my notes about Karl Marx. Karl Marx, Marxists who will know this. Karl Marx didn't work. He sponged off from his friend, Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels got his money from his father, who was a capitalist running industries. So Karl Marx is a theorist of capitalism. He's saying capitalism is bad. He shows how surplus value works. But he lives off his surplus value himself. Does this question of Karl Marx living off his surplus value, not only that, Karl Marx also played the stock exchange. So he went to the stock exchange, Karl Marx, and put money to play the capitalist game. These practices of Karl Marx as an individual, do they collapse his theory and critique of capitalism? I argue not. Marx's critique of capitalism remains valid, irrespective of his own individual behavior, and we can condemn those behaviors. And this is the treatment I want to propose black consciousness should also be accorded. Now let us zero in more specifically on this question, whether BC does in fact is inherently anti-women. And I make a note that, and when I ask this question, is BC inherently anti-women, I hear a voice saying to me, but you are a man. How would you know? Because that question can only be answered by a woman. I hear that voice. My response is, that may be true, but don't we belong to a space and a language community where we are able to communicate meaning to each other as black men and black women? And if this is true, then we should be able to analyze these questions together. What is the evidence for this claim that black consciousness is inherently anti-women? There are two propositions being thrown around. I don't know if there's more. It will be good to see, and I've read a little bit around this. The first is the language question, the use of the language, where black consciousness in the 70s, Migo and Panipichana, by the way, it's Panipichana's phrase, black men, you're on your own. That's Panipichana, who came with that phrase, which then was taken by black consciousness. Black men, to black men, you are on your own. This is the evidence to show that black consciousness is inherently anti-women. But over and above this, Biko over and over, when you read him, speaks about the black men. The black men must come. So he's not saying the black women. So these are the two instances which are being used as evidence. I argue that context and time assist to evaluate the use of language. In the context of the 1970s, at least inside black consciousness, there was no critical appraisal of language use. So if you must go back to the 70s and think of yourself as black consciousness comrades at the time, there was no consciousness of the language question and the critical reflection. There wasn't. So this is a question of time and expressions used for its context. I'm not aware of any evidence where, in fact, there was a challenging of black consciousness to say, don't say black men. And Migo and them insisted we are going to say black men. There's no evidence of this. In fact, both black men and black women used the term black men. to refer to the generic black condition. There was an understanding that all are being included in this articulation. So the question of whether the black woman's pain is excluded at the time did not arise. Well, according to the use of language at the time, if we look at today, surely we will resist that language. We will not. I don't know of any movement that will insist today to use the same. At least the black consciousness organizations I belong to, we will not use the same language. The mistake then made by our sisters who make this claim around black consciousness is to judge black consciousness retrospectively. In other words, you judge black consciousness today in terms of what was happening back then. You can also argue, of course, they should have known and use a liberated language, but we are not judging black consciousness in its real terms, I argue. Well, each contemporality, each time has its own blind spots, and I want to argue that a generation from now, most of the languages that we use today, we think is liberated. I mean, I can see there's a lot of new language people are using to try to explain things. Some of it is really new and very strange because it's new. I argue that in a generation's time, that this language we believe it captures our truth will be seen by our progeny as lacking. In other words, it does not address the question. What I hope and pray for is that the charge of the limitation imposed upon us by our own context, we shall not be judged by that. So this generation which will come will not, when it is so advanced because of the advantage of time, judge us here on the basis of their time. Because this is what this proposition is doing, that black consciousness language use excludes women. The claim made by Mampele Rampele that black men, you're on your own, permitted certain anti-black women behavior comes into conflict with another empirical reality, and this is that some of women at the time of BC say, but not all men behave in this manner. From what we know, no man has argued for male privileges on the basis of the slogans that we have alluded to. So we can say that black men, you are on your own was not a philosophical position justifying patriarchal behavior. In fact, and let me just, the phrase I'm going to use, because we are very careful, we're trying to be careful, and you can't be careful enough. The phrase I'm going to use now is problematic, I think it is. In fact, there is evidence that Steve Biko's womanizing was frowned upon within the black consciousness movement. I'm saying womanizing, and I get the sense that I'm not sure this is the correct term. And so in the question and answer, we can be told, okay, we can't use that language. Maybe there's another thing that expresses the same thing. But it was frowned upon, this big one in particular. But it seems to me that this questioning of Biko's behavior comes from a Christian morality point of view. So Christians in black consciousness, remember, it was a black Christian movement before they became, all of them, including Biko, are Christians. So the other Christians, when they see his behavior, his excessive drinking and many lovers and so on, they were unhappy, but they were unhappy from a Christian morality point of view. Then I think if this womanizing question is a feminist question, it is an interesting alliance between then feminism and Christian conservative morality. It's something that we have got to think about, I think. There is no evidence that Biko uses the slogans to insist on his philandering, if you like, from what we know. I don't know, the father Stubbs has an interesting biography on his interaction with Biko in the latest, if you look at the latest I Write What I Like. It's a long thing. Please read it carefully, because there you get a good sense of, Biko's behavior and the kind of difficulties that he had had. Part of it, of course, is that I just go on a little bit on all these movements, and I've mentioned that we have made some progress there, including the new BC. We have dealt by and large with the issues. It's not new, updated BC. For instance, Blackwash, the movement I was part of, the SNI, we're very clear. We've made, I think, a big development on the issue of the LGBTI, which was not a problem or was not part of the discourse of Biko, but we have been able to deal with that question. Of course, you must still learn and improve. And let us deal with the second proposition. Remember, the first was, is black consciousness, the philosophy itself, exclude women? I think I've tried to show, no, it doesn't. There is nothing in black consciousness as a philosophy that excludes black women. The evidence that has been shown cannot sustain that claim. So maybe the claim needs further elaboration. The second question was, are there some black men of black consciousness involved in patriarchal behavior? The answer is an absolutely emphatic yes. Absolutely. I don't think there is, we can't run away from this question. But also this is because black consciousness men come from a patriarchal society which apportion patriarchal privileges to all men. Huh? Men who are then involved in patriarchal behavior do not represent black consciousness. They represent patriarchy in a patriarchal society. Say that slowly. Again. Men who behave in this patriarchal way do not represent black consciousness. They represent patriarchy. We need to make this clear distinction. There is a slight different point that needs to be made, and it begs the question, ours. Is there amongst people we designate men and heterosexual men here? Is there any one of them who is free of patriarchal tendencies, behaviors, and free from the benefits of patriarchal privileges? A real role model to say, he has transcended the problem of patriarchy.
Is the answer lies in my wife?
So people who, heterosexual men who exist outside of the patriarchal world, do they exist and can they exist? This is a question I think we will have to deal with as moving forward. I have a note I find interesting when I look at Biko and Sobukwe, and I say Sobukwe is an accidental feminist. And you'll hear here now an interesting thing, what's going on. Sobukwe is an accidental feminist. We know that Robert Sobukwe is reported to have been angry with Biko and his comrades for drinking and this womanizing thing. And I think for almost a year, Sobukwe did not talk to Biko at all. That's how angry he was. And Sobukwe, as a father figure, was very worried about this behavior he considered not revolutionary from Biko and his comrades. You must hear the stories when what was happening there in Durban, because Biko and them were there in Durban. You must hear the stories of the things that were going on there. What Sobukwe did, I don't imagine Sobukwe saying, chaps, you are little patriarchs. He must have said, this immoral behavior does not sit well with the expectation of your followers. In fact, Sobukwe said that. He said, Biko does not see that followers expect different kinds of behavior from their leaders. We know this from Father Stapp's account about Sobukwe's consent. Now, here's an interesting contradiction. So Sobukwe said to Biko, don't behave like this. Don't do these things of drinking and having many lovers, which is, of course, the similar. I don't know about the drinking part, but the many lovers part. where I'm sure this is the consideration of the feminist movement as well. So Sobukwe is almost taking the same position, therefore, with the feminist sisters here. And that's why I argue this makes him an accidental feminist. Here is an interesting contradiction. That while Sobukwe's concerns might strike us today as an instance that make him an accidental feminist, it was actually the vulgar patriarch, Biko, whose movement had black women in leadership, not Sobukwe's. This is the point I'm making. It's interesting that Sobukwe is making this point, but it is actually black consciousness. And here I call Biko a vulgar patriarch. Permit me to do so as a Bigoist. It was this movement that was able to empower women to a point of leadership, not Sobukwe's. Up to now, only black consciousness had a woman's president. If you look at the liberation movement in this country, liberation movement as Pan-Africanist, let's accept ANC also in that, okay, the ANC and black consciousness. Only black consciousness had a woman president. In 1972, the Black People's Convention had Winfred Khware, who was elected as a president. President is, we can't imagine it now because none of our movement has a woman president, right? If you imagine the ANC having a woman's president, that what happened. It is the only movement that had that. So I make this point here, that this makes for interesting inquiry into the personal gender dodgy behavior of Biko and his public political practice that seemed to empower women's participation at the highest possible level versus Sobukwe's personal accidental feminism, as I call it, but public political behavior that sustains women's place outside of the main arena of struggle. I just think that it would be, those of us who are interested in Biko and Sobukwe, it would be nice to probe a little bit on these questions. And now I'm going to fast track very, very fast. I have here, and these notes will give the notes because they're very detailed. We can give the notes to people to read. I don't go into the origins of black consciousness in my notes, but I don't want to spend too much time there, except to say, if black consciousness, you have to understand it as a response to the first encounter between us and white people. That's the first response that explains black consciousness. Now, of course, if you think about pre-slavery, there were some affirming black practices which black consciousness had to take. But let's say, as a political, revolutionary, philosophical, anti-oppression philosophy starts with our encounter with white people. It's a response. I don't think if white people did not come here and disrupt our lives, we would have spent this time developing black consciousness, and it would not have developed the way it had. First, you have to go to slavery and think about those runaway slaves, or what Malcolm X calls the field Negroes. In the Eastern Cape, notice in the Cape, we have to think about the project Amakaba and Amakgoboka. We won't go into that, but we know that Amakaba refused to enter Western modernity, and they were, of course, literally murdered. Ahmad Kopoka, who is us here, we entered the Western modernity. That's why we speak in English today. To survive, we had to internalize white subjectivities. Our creation as black people goes back to this blackening. And the blackening normally, and I wrote a whole essay about this, the three conditions that make us black. 1, land dispossession. 2, dispossession of our labor. 3, destruction and dispossession of the African beings. They destroyed our African beings. And out of those processes, then we were, what here I go on to talk about, Fanon's thingification of a people. Out of these relationships, and I leave all this stuff out, the important point to make is that today in the white world exists two relationships which intersect, if you like. The relationship between whites and black is a vertical one. And from this relationship, it doesn't matter what language you speak, what culture you have, what sexual orientation you are, and so what age you are just black. That's how the white world treats you. Of course, when we do it in a horizontal fashion amongst ourselves, then these differences begin to make sense. But in the relationship between us and white people, our gender, there is no question of your gender that matters. In fact, recently, if you think about the students of the University of Free State, when there was a fight, they were beating black guys and black women with the same energy. They were not saying, oh, this one is a woman, needs a different treatment. The white world, when it looks at us, it does not differentiate us by our sexual preferences, identities, our language, our cultures, our age, and so on. There is no gender agency there. A black man is not a man in the white world. He is a child and a boy. The black woman is a property. You know, this is the unfortunate thing which happened with the misunderstanding, that some people then said, when we argue this point, they said that we're justifying violence. Under slavery, black women could not legally be raped. Does not mean rape does not happen, but because you are property, the slave master does it, they wish with you. You can't go to any court and say, I am being violated, right? But what we know now also is that, by the way, public raping of black men under slavery was an occurrence. That was very general. That was part of breaking down the slave. So you will, as a slave who's fighting, as a male slave, you will be raped publicly by the master to break you down. In the same way they rape our sisters, because we're all property. So you gotta understand that relationship. I make a point here about, and I jump a little here, and I make a point about the need to be careful about the structural questions. Bigo teaches us something which I want us to carry, because it will help us when we deal with a few other questions. If we accept this vertical relationship, then black people's sins are absolved, because in this relationship, which is created by this white God, our experiences are shaped by the white system. Bigo says, for instance, the murder, the housebreaking, the physical violence, the rape going on in the township is a creation of white society. He says this very clearly, and then Bigo says we must put blame in the white society. Because he understands that this reality, our experience is shaped not by ourselves, but by the invisible hand of white supremacy. Using Bigo's structural analysis, in fact, we then will not insist necessarily on individual culpability. I want to make a quick example because I want to go to the conclusion of this use of this Bigo's structural analysis. In 2008, there was xenophobia in Joburg. Black people we South Africans were killing. We killed 62 black people from outside of South Africa. 62. By the way, a third of those people were South Africans. Kabandawa Mnyama from South Africa were killed. Now, here what happened. I'm saying the issue of experience, privileging your reality. You must be careful, because your reality is not created by you. Let me just make this proposition about why you must be suspicious of your own feelings. When we went to the church, there was a church there which kept these people who are running away from Alexander, who survived the violence, our black people from Zimbabwe in particular. I arrived there with a white boy from Wits. And here what's happened. And that thing really, I think, broke my heart, because what happened is that the Zimbabwean brothers and sisters literally went to the white boy and hugged him and told me that you black South Africans, you are jealous of us, you are lazy, and that's why you are killing us. This white man has done nothing wrong. White people in South Africa has done nothing wrong to us. Instead, they've given us work. I was frozen for a little while, because it is true. In Alexander, it is black people who are killing our brothers and sisters. It is true. It is us black people who are causing havoc in the lives of these quiriquiris. They don't see a white man doing that. Their experience, their reality is that it is black people who are the enemy. We know as Pan-Africanists that it is not black people who have created the conditions where we're killing each other for jobs, just like for bread. The enemy that is creating this mayhem in black community is absent. We end up blaming each other, as it happened in the situation I've just described. So, we must be suspicious, black people. We must be suspicious of our feelings. We must be suspicious of our experiences. We must be suspicious of our reality. Because all these things are not ours. I would have gone on and explained how Black consciousness overcome that problem, but I think I must come to the conclusion. Black consciousness overcome this problem of experience. Because Amapunu here, they said, they are whites on top, Indians second, so-called colors third, you Africans at the bottom. Now, if Biko took this thing of experience and my reality seriously, he would have said to Africans at the bottom, you have no business forming a movement for liberation with colors and Indians because white people give them some privileges that you don't have. But Biko understood that these different experiences were created by the system precisely to break us down and to divide us. So what you do, you refuse that reality. You refuse to accept that reality and you create a different philosophy which helps you to fight for change. So let's come, I'm making a concluding remarks now. We have said in that the relationship between us and white people, this vertical one, there is no gender agency. But what about the horizontal relationship? Here, we learn from the Afro-pessimists that there are contradictions amongst us black people. Tribalism, patriarchy, superstition, self-hate, and we can go on and on. But unlike this vertical relationship with white people, these contradictions, and we're using Mao's formulation is that these contradictions are non-antagonistic. The first contradiction between us and the white system is antagonistic. And that relationship cannot be ended except if we defeat the white system and white people. You don't enter into conversation with an enemy in the antagonistic relationship. You must organize, kill them, win, create a new society. But when the contradiction is non-antagonistic, such as patriarchy, in the black space, we can resolve this through dialogue, learning, criticism, self-criticism, patience, changing of behavior. We can do that. Because we are not enemies. Black men are not enemies of black women. We are not enemies. White people are our enemies. We don't dialogue with them. You don't dialogue with the enemy. But if our sisters say we are enemies, then of course they must not dialogue with us, they must kill us. Absolutely, and I will be sympathetic to that thinking, because your enemy, you don't enter into dialogue with the enemy, you must kill the enemy. But contradictions amongst us, these ones, we can resolve. Tribalism, Xhosa versus Zulu. We can sit down as brothers and sisters. This thing can be resolved. Here in the Western Cape, your problem with the so-called coloreds, call these people and say, look, yeah, man, the land belongs to all of us. We all Khoisan. The enemy is those ones, it's not us. Through dialogue, we have resolved a contradiction. But with white people, what are you going to say? They stole our land, they must return land. That is the only thing that they must do. Now, I want to make some moves in conclusion about what do we do as black men. Now I'm talking to the heterosexual. Pura was teaching me all by DT. Which one? Cishead. Yeah, cishead. If we accept the proposition I'm putting forward that these contradictions are non-antagonistic, it means we can resolve them. Of course, not completely, because it means that, remember, the stuff going on in our society. The reason why black men are beasts, we kill each other. And I mean, I put a statistic here to show. We kill each other. You know, annually in South Africa, we kill 17,000 black people. 17,000 annually. Elokshini, killing each other, shooting and all that. 17,000. Of the 17,000, 14,000 are black men killing each other. The 14,000 black men go down with 3,000 black sisters. So there is a permanent war going on in the ghetto, in the black zone, which is a war which we did not create. So, but as we said, even in war, even in hostile territory, we must create the enclaves we call liberated spaces. There's some kind of behavior. What I hope we can do in future is to think about the reality that black men are created this way by the conditions that they find themselves in. We can teach black men to be good. Malcolm X did it. I hope you know Malcolm X managed to get black people away from drugs, took our sisters away from prostitution, give purpose to our lives. But if you go to the run-down spaces of black America today, black people are back to drugs. Black people are back to prostitution to survive because they did not end the condition that creates us as subhumans. So whilst we create these quilombos, we must remember the big fight is to end the machine that produces us as subhuman. So what are we going to do? Is to say that the contradiction between, let's acknowledge this, the antagonistic contradiction between black and white can only be resolved by black rage. Black rage. That contradiction between us and whites. The non-antagonistic contradictions amongst black people can be resolved through the concept of black love. This concept, I'm told, was repeated last week. Black love is not and must not be built on an ethical basis. Black love does not mean accepting being bullied and being silenced. Black love does not mean putting our contradictions under the table and keep them shut under this collective white mailing system of it's a family matter. But we should know, when we are out there with the white enemy, we are not going to raise our family things with white people there. When we fight with white people, you can't say, leader, we are fighting with white people here. You can't come to me and say, leader, you have not done the dishes and not taken care of the children. Let us deal with the white person. Then when we're done, then you say, leader, but also that thing of yours, you must take care of that business. I guess now, in the middle of the war with the white person, the sister complains that you have not done your duties. Of course, she's right. I have not done my duties. And I am wrong. I should have done my duties. But we need to be able to say, at this moment, let us deal with the bigger enemy. And then it does not mean we must not go back to talk. You must say, let us do the talking. Your behavior as a black brother is not helping us. Black love means taking responsibility for creating this liberated territory. Black love does not mean suspending the criticism amongst ourselves. Black love must mean stopping the nastiness, mean-spiritedness, so pervasive amongst us. There's a mean spirit amongst us, the way we deal with each other. Black love must mean that we don't get into that kind of mean-spiritedness. Well, I do argue that black love does mean black come first. An example is this. If you find a sister fighting a white person, your job is not to ask the black sister, Nilo Landoni. Your job is to help the black sister defeat the white person, and after you must say, but now I guess why are you doing this fight with white people? Then you will resolve, because if you move from black first, you are able to do so. There are some specific things that we black men must do as part of this Black Love project. We must admit patriarchy exists and is a problem. It's a problem for us, black men, and it's a problem for our sisters. Black men, please, take responsibility for your children. It's not going to help us, this business of making children, and then we leave the... Oh, there's the father. Yeah, thank you. Give me a big hand. Also, let us make peace in our living spaces and at home. We must not be the people who are the... when I grew up there at my home, my uncle used to come there. He buys me the mini. And then he goes to drink. That man arrived at 3 a.m. That man does not knock in the door. He kicks the door. And his first demand is, here. Nobody has been allowed to open the door nicely. And then, of course, sometimes some of us arrived earlier. We're also drinking. We ate the meat of the man. He opens that place. There's no meat. Now everybody must wake up in their house. There is terror. So black men, please, we must bring Utolo in those spaces. Black love must mean we must listen when black sisters speak. Black love must mean that we must think about this thing I've just done taking so much time. We must be aware of taking too much time as black men. Black love dictates that we as black men take the first responsibility for our action and ask for forgiveness from our sisters. And I hope it's not too late to do so. Black love means we leave this space here as a people who will check their behavior. I'm talking about to black men. Improve on it and to be able to be better revolutionaries. Now, as part of this commitment, I myself, Andile Mngxitama, I say that to all the women I have wronged, to all the black sisters that I have hurt, I am sorry. Now, you must listen carefully, black brothers. Well, I know that I will leave this place not as a perfect brother. I'm not going to live as a perfect brother, as a perfect father, as a perfect revolutionary. In fact, I commit myself to change. Of course, does not mean there are not going to be lapses and so on, but the commitment must be there. We must imagine ourselves as people going through rehabilitation. You know, a drug addict that goes through rehabilitation is an ongoing process. You are never finished in that thing. Now I want to ask you brothers in the house, you who are here, think a little bit carefully. And we're talking about those black men. I want you also to turn to the sister next to you and do the same. And say that you are sorry. Please don't give things of, I must explain why I'm sorry. No, in the general reality of patriarchy, we are all of us offending every single day. We are not asking you, you might think of yourself as a perfect man, but there are privileges that come to you that you are not aware of by virtue of being a man. So let us do that. Let's turn to the sister next to you and say that you are sorry. Thank you, comrade. And also, I mean, Pura, don't overdo it also. I mean. Pura is asking, yeah, if you are sincere, it is enough, Pura, to say it once. If you are sincere, it's enough to say utolo, right? Now, you can also send text messages. You know, my comrade, you know that sister you have wronged, right? You know, we don't know, you know. Just send a text message and do the same. No arguments, no justification, no defenses. Brothers, let us say we are sorry. And go see Pastor. Okay, let me